Welcome to the Thinking Fellows podcast. My name is Caleb, and I'm joined by Drs. Rod Rosenblatt, Scott Keith, and Adam Francisco. We are still in this Great Ideas of the Reformation series. We're going to be doing this all summer and in the beginning half of the fall as we lead up to the 500th anniversary of the Lutheran Reformation and our conference celebrating that called the Here We Still Stand Conference. We're doing this show to kind of get some of the ideas flowing before people go to that conference, so that you're prepared, what it's about, what we're celebrating, the ideas that changed and renewed Christianity during the Reformation and continue to do so. And today we're talking about Soli Deo Gloria, the glory be to God alone. And we're doing this as a wrap-up to the Sola series that we've started with. We started with Sola Scriptura, we did Sola Gratia, Sola Fide, Solus Christus, and this is kind of the fifth element to that, the final piece. And I think there's a good reason for ending on this. The first four have to do with a confession of faith and salvation, right? And then this one is kind of the after. I want to say that Soli Deo Gloria is more vocational in essence, right? It has to do with the now what question. You guys, am I on the right track there?
Well, I see it. I don't know. If you take the solas, you're kind of turning a screw, right? And you're dialing everything down. And I think we got to the pointy end in the last episode with Solus Christus, where everything is pointing towards that your salvation is because of, on account of, for the sake of Christ alone. Sola Scriptura reveals that. Sola Gratia sets the stage that it's God has grace on you, His favor rests upon you, and that He gives you this gift of faith that relies on Christ alone. And Soli Deo Gloria is sort of that final turning of the screw. I think that when you look back on everything, you have no claim at all to merit.
That's it.
You have no claim at all to worth or worthiness in the process of your salvation. Yep. You really have no claim at all in the process of your salvation. The only thing that you've added to it is sin, and that the whole time, beginning to end, it has been God's work, and thus we give God alone the glory.
Yep. Nice summary.
Does it have to do with your daily life? I think, yeah, in a sense, but more so what's going on here is just putting that final turn to the screw so that you really can make no claim to having participated in your salvation.
Yeah.
So, I think that some of this too has to do with, and maybe Adam can help us out here with the history of some of these heresies. I think some of this too, especially the Soli Deo Gloria, perhaps, has to do with trying to take a particular stand against some of the heresies and sort of sub-heresies that have made their way into the church of the time, like semi-Pelagianism, and that this is really a confession against that type of thing.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say. If you want to add something to it other than your sin, then it's not going to be Soli Deo Gloria. My contribution to being a Christian is my sin.
Right.
So could we get into that a little bit? Could you maybe outline Pelagianism and semi-Pelagianism and how that really goes against the essence of this?
Well, putting it in the Reformation context, I don't know if a slogan is the right term, but it was common when talking about salvation or justification in the late Middle Ages to talk about it or to say that God does not deny grace to those who do that which is within them, that which is in
their power.
And that's it. I mean, that's kind of a semi-Pelagianism. Pelagianism being a heresy from the early church.
And Pelagianism is fairly simple. There is no original sin.
Yeah, that's what it boils down to.
Isn't it? It's very simple. Yeah. It's a self-salvation start to finish, and the church threw him out, and they should have thrown him out.
Yeah. Should have given a punch on the nose like they did with
like Santa Claus.
But you can find this throughout the 15th century. the century that Luther's born and goes to university, or the very tail end of that facere quod esse est, to do that which is
within you, that lies within you.
Yeah.
And the assumption there is, by your natural abilities, even as a child of Adam, there's still something you can do to cooperate. Mm-hmm. And the Reformers had to go against that.
I mean, the late Middle Ages, they acknowledge original sin of a sort, but you still have this little spark, if you will, this little flame within you that if you just fan it into flame, God will kind of meet you halfway. That's semi-Pelagianism. That's not as crass as the early 4th century Pelagianism that says you do it from start to finish. Semi-Pelagianism says that you do as best as you can. It ain't good enough. But God's going to reward you in a way for doing your best, and He's going to meet you halfway.
You take one step, God will take two.
Something like that. Or you even take the slightest falling forward on a football field, and He will come 99 yards, but you had to at least fall forward. And you can, and you must, that sort of stuff.
And the work that you do to meet God halfway throughout the whole medieval period it's not that it's just crass work. It's not just being a good moral person. It looks real pious, the whole sacramental system. You do all these things, these ecclesiastical functions, if you will, and those are counted as good works. You pray to the saints. You take the sacrament of the altar, and those are all sort of things that God has given for you to do so that He might reward you.
I remember Rod used to, in class, you used the example of a spark, right? The example you used to use in class with semi-Pelagianism is, and now that I've read more on World War I, it makes a lot more sense to me, sort of a World War I battle scene after the battle, and how the medics would go around to see if people that looked to be dead were still alive, right?
Rome's picture is having lost health. Grace is medicinal, and it can impart to you energy that you lost by being a child of Adam. Not everything, you're not dead in sin, but you've really been severely wounded and weakened.
Yeah, we have a blog over on the 1517 website that I'll link that is, I believe the title is that the church is a morgue, not a hospital.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Joel Hess.
Yes.
He got into some trouble for that. Isn't that kind of funny?
Really?
Internally from some other pastors.
Really?
Yeah. Which I thought it was astounding, because from undergrad days, you've taught me that, no, it's a morgue.
Yeah.
And then you read the scriptures, and St. Paul seems to be pretty clear on the fact that the sinner needs to be brought back to life.
Yeah.
So, was Sola Deo and Adam, Caleb brought this up with me before the show, and I wasn't sure of the answer. He said he had read somewhere that Soli Deo Gloria wasn't one of the 5 original hallmarks of the Reformation, that it was sort of added later by people like Johann Sebastian Bach. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I would think it would be added, and this is kind of off the hip. You don't see it so much in the actual terminology,
in the actual slogan
in Luther but
I don't recall it in
Melanchthon. It's implied or it's assumed, but you certainly would see it in the Reform circles, Calvinistic Reformation, as they emphasize divine monergism, if you will. But the actual phrase, I have no idea when it begins, but it's you don't see it in the early 16th century. That's what I can say for certain. But
I don't remember seeing it either. But I think if you read through the text, if you read through the writings of the Lutheran reformers, you see it. Even if you're not seeing the Soli Deo Gloria, particularly, you see it. I mean, Melanchthon goes on like these long excursus on paragraph after paragraph of how many ways your works need to be excluded. From really you seeing them as meritorious at all, even though they may exist in some way, shape, or form. especially after your conversion and after you become a Christian. And that's one of the things Melanchthon gets in trouble for, right? Saying is that good works are necessary.
Yep.
And specifically saying they're necessary to salvation. But
Yep.
even in that section of the Loci, when he does that, after he tries to explain that he's saying necessary in that the saved sinner will by their conversion do good works, he'll go on paragraphs after that and say not that these can ever be seen as meritorious.
Not
for your
this,
salvation.
not that, not this, not
yeah.
that. Yeah, good on him.
And so the phrase maybe isn't there, but it's there. It lies under the text.
Yeah, and this is kind of what I was getting at the beginning in the vocational sense, is that this phrase is attached to really not allow your good works to be something that you've done to earn salvation. That even the good works that you have are merited as good because of God,
even those.
the glory of God.
Right.
And you'll find reformers' prayers that ask for forgiveness for our good works.
Yeah.
Drives a Roman Catholic priest crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and you often see, I'll teach that in class, because when you do in a basic theology class and you cover the topic of good works, you inevitably have to deal with what about the pagan, the non-believer, who externally seems to be doing good works.
Sometimes even better works.
Even better works. And I think we could all tell stories in our lives. I know Rod has a story about when his daughter was diagnosed with cancer and how the people at her job, where she was working at REI at the time, who were almost pagans all, responded, gave up their work time gave up their vacation time so that she could still be paid while she was being treated.
Yep.
And times in our lives, went back when we were in Carson City and things kind of went to crap, the people that stepped up to help us on the whole were our people like Megan and Mike and Joel Dunn, and people that were, not Christian, but just decent people.
Yep. Calvin does more with that than we do, and we just have to acknowledge that. But he speaks of those things as gifts to the pagan of common grace.
Right.
They're noble. They're praiseworthy. They're all kinds of things. They're not saving.
Right. They're civil. Right?
Yeah.
It's in the civil realm.
They're civil, and you can even say they're in the civil realm. They're moments of civility, and it's just civil.
Yeah, the guy who falls with his helmet on a German grenade, and his chest gets blown out, and 8 other guys don't take a hit. That's praiseworthy in anybody's book.
Yeah. Is it a good thing? Is it a good work? I think we would say, as it pertains to his relationship before God, no.
Yep.
It's not.
Yep.
And that's hard for people. But at the end, we say the only works that are seen as good in that sense by God are those that are done by the people who stand in Christ alone.
Yep.
And it's only because he sees them through the lens of Christ.
Yep.
Yeah.
And not because he sees them just for how praiseworthy we might think they are on the civil realm, or they might even be on the civil realm.
Yep.
But because they're in Christ alone. And in that way, all of this glory, in that sense too, but to a lesser degree than what it has to do with your salvation, is going to God alone.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think when you see Soli Deo Gloria added to like a Johann Sebastian Bach piece or something like that, you see it, added to a work of music that's trying to portray your salvation. Too, and this is mostly something that has to do with salvation-oriented issues.
Outside evaluation of that, the fellow who does the teaching for the teaching company on Bach's B minor Mass is an utter atheist. But in his first lecture, he says it, and then he says, "If you don't understand Luther's theology, nothing that Bach has written is going to make any sense to you." And he was an atheist.
Really?
And I thought, good for you. Good for you.
So what's left to say on this one? This is maybe one that we were stretching to get 45 minutes out of, but I think it's central in my mind. It's central because of how it puts sort of the icing on the cake. I think that I'm not sure you can approach Soli Deo Gloria without understanding the other solas. You'd be sort of telling a story by telling the end first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd be reading the book backwards in the sense. We come to the knowledge that all glory goes to God alone because from the scriptures alone, we've learned that it's by his grace alone, through the faith that he gives as a gift alone, on account of Christ alone, that we are saved.
Yeah, this really does come full circle. I mean, when we started with Sola Scriptura and Sola Fide, one of the struggles for this series of episodes versus some others that we've done in the past is isolating these pieces.
Yeah.
'Cause it's because they all are part of a picture of salvation.
There's a section in Chemnitz where Chemnitz works on this too, and they're called the particular participles.
Yeah, Melanchthon starts that early in the 1530s too. The particular exclusiva.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it isn't a long read. It's only a few pages, but it's a worthwhile read.
Yeah.
For it is by grace, through faith, on account of the death of Christ and the cross and the blood, click, 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 and so forth. And Chemnitz does that, and Melanchthon does it, evidently.
Yeah. 1535 Loci, and thereafter it's all over the place. Melanchthon gives full explanations of this idea of the particula exclusiva. And what he's trying to do is he's attempting to narrow down the fact that you're leaving everything else behind.
Yep.
So it's the exclusiveness of it that really that John 14:6, that it's that Christ alone, that it's exclusively Christ and his work for the sinner that saves and dials everything out. And even when even for Melanchthon, I know through Chemnitz too, when discussing grace, when discussing faith, when discussing any of those things that we typically attribute salvation to in some way, shape, or form, right? God's grace,
Yes.
Our own faith. The reformers, when they're at their best, they'll even break through that and say, okay, God's grace saves you, but on account of Christ.
Yep. Always.
Your faith is saving, but on account of Christ.
Yeah.
And it's narrowing down. And that's why I meant at the beginning that this Soli Deo Gloria seems like the final turning of the screw to me. It's like you're looking, you've sort of gone through all of the different areas of the valley, and now you're standing on the top of the hill and you're looking at it and you're saying, wow, look at that picture, because you can kind of see the whole map from that perspective, and you're saying it must be by God's work alone that this all happens.
Start to finish.
Because now I can see the picture. Now I can see the map, and it makes sense. And that's why I think it's difficult to approach this. It would be difficult to start with Soli Deo Gloria because you kind of have to tell the story.
Yeah.
You kind of have to draw the map for somebody to see, wow, it really is Soli Deo Gloria. This really was God's work alone, and thus he gets all the glory alone.
And I think back to the story I've told before and won't tell it again of mathematician Robert Meyer saying, I think the most important doctrine to come out of the 16th century was a true doctrine of sin. And I thought about it for a minute. If you don't have a real doctrine of sin, or you really are dead, or worse, you're an active enemy of God, yet dead. I mean, it's really, really dark. Then the gospel can make sense. And I can see why he said that. The most important thing was a real doctrine of sin.
Yeah.
Yeah, we struggle. I think there's just a massive struggle with that today. I think this is kind of abstract, but I remember watching the Batman versus Superman, what was it, last year when it came out? And at the end of that movie, it drove me crazy because the tie-up to that movie was, if we can all come together, if humanity can all just do better, we can make this right. We can fix these wrongs. We can and do this injustice. And I just hear that narrative that, outside of movies, outside of whatever, I just hear that constantly, this upward optimism that as long as we're just becoming morally better, our social justice is becoming more efficient and yada, 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 we are not going to have the problems in the world today. Medicine's going to get to the point where disease won't kill us. We won't be killing each other, end war, world peace, all this stuff. And what it shows is, a really, it's the antithesis to Soli Deo Gloria. It's all the glory be to us because we can capture this.
I would definitely say the last two that we've covered, Solus Christus and Soli Deo Gloria, are the two most offensive solas in the modern day. I'd say most people could get behind looking at the Bible for what you should believe, teach, and confess. Most people could get behind the idea that God's grace is saving. Most people can certainly get behind the idea that their faith is saving because they think they're doing something there.
Yep.
These two are offensive because they really particularly, right?
Yeah.
Exclude you.
Yep.
They exclude your contribution to the effort of your salvation. And they do it in very specific ways. Through God's work, his plan of salvation, on account of Christ alone.
Yeah. I used to tell my Westmont student to go to a liturgical church and borrow a hymnal. And I said, in that hymnal, you're going to find a piece called the Te Deum Laudamus.
Right.
And it'll be just one page. But you ought to Xerox that. And the reason you might use it in prayer, or the reason you might compare it to your usual prayers, is there's no mention of you whatever.
Yeah.
You don't occur in it.
Right.
It is strictly praise of God who saves,
Right.
how he saves, and you're the recipient, and you contribute nothing, or you contribute disobedience, rebellion, sin, and so forth. That's your part.
Yeah, and that's not a popular message even in today's Christianity.
No.
Yeah. And hasn't been for a long time. I mean, Christianity of our age really is, and of every age, I'm sure, is grasping at the straws to find some way where they can contribute to what God has already accomplished.
Yep.
And that's why telling the story of the Solas, it's important to tell the whole story. And it's important to end, I think, on the two that we ended with.
Yeah.
Really getting to that pointy end of the stick, really getting to narrow the focus and realize that these solas matter because they are telling the story of our salvation, which is handed to us on account of Christ alone, and that has been God's plan and work alone from beginning to end.
Yeah, it's free or you don't get it.
Yeah.
If you try to buy it, it's all, the contract is canceled.
Mm-hmm. Great. We're going to take a break now. We'll come back. We're going to talk about the conference a little bit. And then for the latter half of this episode, I'd like to talk about how these types of things are going to appear at the conference, why these pillars are still going to need to be maintained.
Sounds good.
Within Lutheranism, maybe some attacks against them and how we can continue these ideas. So we'll be back in just one moment.
Great.
Welcome to our break, but also the latter half of our show, because I think this is just going to tie together. Before we talk about the conference and kind of talk about the application of the solas in today's world, I'd like to just ask people to go follow us on Facebook and Twitter if you haven't already. We'd love to just see kind of a bump at those pages. Those are some of the best ways to get in direct communication with us. We post new episodes every week there. I also post some content from 1517. I share conferences and things like that where our speakers are going to be at. So if you'd like to get that kind of information, see chances to meet the fellows, come talk with us, discuss with us different things about the show, you can reach us there. You can message me directly on Facebook and things like that. So if you'd go on your iPhone or whatever you use to access social media and go and just search Thinking Fellows, we'll pop up on either Facebook and Twitter, and you can find us there. And if you haven't subscribed to the show, we would love you to, because what it means is whether you remember to go download an episode or not, it's going to come straight to your phone or your computer or whatever you use to listen to podcasts every week. And that means that we're still getting the downloads for the month, even if you have to go listen to it later. So you'll never be behind. You can play catch up. You can have them all pre-downloaded if you're going on a road trip and not have to worry about if you're going through the mountains and you lose service. And it's just the best way to keep up with the show week to week. I'd also really like to remind people that this show exists because of donations from listeners and supporters of 1517, the Legacy Project, and the Thinking Fellows podcast. And we could really use your help right now in the middle of the year. We're trying to raise enough money to keep the podcast going independently from the rest of the money that 1517 gets, and I could use listener help in reaching my goal this year of $60,000 for the podcast. So I think about usually get around halfway. Last year we got about halfway to that mark, and I'd like to try to get that full amount this year. So if you'd like to find out more about 1517 before you donate, or would like to talk to me about some of the specific need we have at this show, you can feel free to email me. If you go to Thinking Fellows website, there's a contact button, and if you hit the contact us page, that goes directly into my inbox, and we can talk more. And thank you to all those who listen and already support the show. We couldn't do this every week without you. It takes a lot of work to make sure that we never miss an episode, that we're able to get some of the guests that we've had on this show on, that we can travel to conferences to meet with people, that we can throw events together. So thank you for that help. All right, so now we're going to talk about the Here We Still Stand conference and how that plays into these pillars of the Reformation. I really like that because, episode 1 of this, Sola Scriptura, that's Dr. Francisco when he was outlining kind of what these were. It's kind of like if you remembered nothing else out of the Reformation, you could get to the rest of the Reformation ideas from here, right? Between the solas and justification. And so
these are kind of looking back at the Reformation, what are the major themes? Mm-hmm. What are the markers?
Right.
What makes it distinct from
Yes.
the rest of the history of the church?
Yeah, what marks it, separates it out. And so and we think that this is worth celebrating. And so Dr. Keith, we're going to have this conference this year. And you've been talking about this on different radio shows. You've been on the Key Life radio show, that's right?
Yeah, a couple times.
And so why are these worth celebrating? I guess a conference is a celebration, but in a way it's also kind of remembrance, right? It's a coming back to these ideas, making sure that these are still at the front of our mind. And so what's the idea behind the conference and doing that?
Well, I think the historian in the room can correct me, but I think it's accurate to say that the ideas we're celebrating, even if for no other reason that they changed the world. I mean, the Reformation marks a shift in history, in theology, in the way we approach not only our salvation, but for those who came out of the Reformation with a different sense of vocation and the meaningfulness of their work and their lives in service to one another, a shift in the way they approach that. And so it really, a shift in politics with two kingdoms ideas, it really influenced everything. And so an event like that, certainly all of those ideas didn't come out in 1517, and we're not celebrating, the anniversary of all of those ideas isn't in 2017, but the genesis of, what sort of struck the match that lit the movement where all of these ideas came out eventually started in 1517, and so we're celebrating now. And in a lot of ways, the conference itself is meant to celebrate the solas. It'll do that primarily through examining different scriptural texts that deal with the solas, deal with the idea of grace alone and faith alone.
It'll also illustrate in how many ways Luther himself was not a revolutionary. There were revolutionaries in the 16th century, both secular and, quote, Christian. He wasn't part of it. And this shows up today in worship, where he will have not just baptism and not just the Lord's Supper, but he will have a liturgy that isn't de nuovo, the first in 2,000 years. In other words, he was of the makeup to say, if something is not destructive of the gospel, we'll keep it. Mm-hmm. It's to be retained. We're not going to start with a blank slate. And there were all kinds of people who said, we can do this. We can do this. It'll work. And he would have none of it.
Right. Even people that started with him tried
Yeah.
to create a blank slate,
Yeah.
and he said, "No, we're not. We'll have none of that."
Yeah, if you could shave the edges off baptism and the supper, we'd have a lot more friends.
Yeah.
He was completely intransigent
Yeah.
on it. No, 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 no. But he was just as intransigent on Christianity began with me.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and so and he relied on the text, and the conference in a lot of ways is relying on those same texts. We'll have somebody covering 2 Corinthians 5:16 through 21, parts of Romans 3, 19 through 26, some of the great Galatians passages from Galatians 3:10 through 4, and then people covering different people within the Reformation, specifically Luther and Melanchthon, the sort of the two early characters in this movement. Dr. Montgomery is going to come and do a full hour or so on why the Reformation still matters today.
Great.
One of the things we didn't do, which I'm assuming we'll get to, one of the Reformation sort of hallmarks or slogans that's come out of this is Semper Reformata, right? Sort of always reforming. Why is that important?
I like that you said that there's going to be just examinations of certain pieces of the text, because I think when we look back at it, and we asserted this by starting with Sola Scriptura, but some of the main gist of the problems that come in the Reformation is the movement away from the authority of the text to the authority of us and our traditions.
Yes.
And things like that. And so for this conference to not be just a celebration of Lutheran traditions from the last 500 years, but to really go back and examine the text and start there, is a fantastic way to actually do the Reformation, because as we said here, that's where it starts.
Well, yeah,
Scripture.
And the last presentation that'll be given will be given on Romans 1:16 through 17, which I think is the dynamite of salvation passage, as Rod would say back in the day.
Yeah.
For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God unto salvation for all who believe, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. And so, I mean, that's what that's what we're trying to do. I mean, the breakout sessions will all be sort of Reformation centered, talking about two kingdoms and a law and gospel, priesthood of all believers, eschatology, Islam and the Reformation. Adam will be there and doing that. Donovan Riley will come and do the bondage of the will. I mean, just Reformation celebration from beginning to end.
Yep.
In San Diego.
And the ticket price, I mean, we keep doing specials on the ticket price, which blows me away, because I'm down at the bottom of the page, and I knew this, but it's to see it all in one place. Ticket price includes general conference talks, choice of breakouts, shuttle to Grace Lutheran Church for a hymn sing, where we're flying in a renowned concert organist to help us with the hymn sing, 2 breakfasts, 1 lunch, 1 plated dinner, and 1 dessert buffet. I mean, that's...
So you get a bunch of meals in there, too, which...
celebrating Reformation gluttony.
Yeah, I was just in France for the Apologetics Academy for the last 2 weeks, and I'd say the second most expensive part of travel outside of your airfare is eating.
Food, yeah, always.
Yep.
Always.
It's amazing how quickly that stacks up day after day.
Yeah, so people need to check it out. It's herewestillstand.org.
And with listening to this show, you can get 10% off of that conference by putting in the code FELLOWS, FELLOWS. And so if you're looking at that, I mean, the price at full price is still great, but again, 10% off for listening to this show. And we are gonna be there recording live. I know we've said that a couple times, but
yeah, I can do that too. So on Thursday the 19th is a recording of live podcast. So most of the podcasts that are connected to 1517 in some way, or are just our friends.
Yeah.
We'll be there recording ringside with the Jagged Word guys. Will be at 11:30 a.m.
That'll be interesting live.
Yeah, that'll be weird live. 40 minutes in the Old Testament is at 12:30 p.m. Front Porch with the Fitzes is at 1:30 p.m. I'm going to crash that one. Virtue in the Wasteland 2:30, and then we're finishing off at
we're the closeout.
We're the closers.
Yeah, we're
3:30 Thinking Fellows recording.
Yeah, so your probably going to want to come early to get a spot, though, right?
And we're going to try to grab Steve Paulson to be on our show, too.
Yeah, that'll be cool. We're trying to get guests. If you're listening to this show now, just a quick update. We're going to be, Dr. Keith and I are going to be out at a conference in Norway, too, so you can expect some special episodes to come out of that visit, as always, when we travel for the show. And then I'm going to be in Valpo, Indiana, this week. So if you're listening to this, I'm flying home right now from there. But I'm going to try to, at a Higher Things conference there, I'm going to try to record a couple episodes with some people while I'm there.
Right.
So,
going to try to wrangle Donovan into a corner and see if you can get him to record?
Yeah, maybe. That'd be fun. He's been fantastic on the show before. So, yeah. So, once again, thank you for listening to this show. Thank you for supporting this show. It's a lot of fun to be able to do this new series. You know, we, coming from the Lutheran tradition, the Reformation, these ideas are important to us, and we believe that their impact on Christianity today is still important, still relevant. And so you can share this with your friends if you're a Lutheran, or if you're not a Lutheran, you just say, people are always asking you, what are you guys doing? What are you talking about? Share the show with your friends so that we can get more people interested in these ideas, get more people kind of on the same page, and please come join us at the conference.
All right.
All right. We'll catch you next time.